Hi, I'm sharing here an interview that I had the other day with Shamis from Carb Health. For those of you who know me, probably this topic is a bit repetitive because he basically asked me questions about my transition into RAWVEganism. However, I feel like some interviewers have different sets of questions and probably you haven't heard of some of my answers. So my wish is that you can find some value out of this interview. Shamis and his brother run a plant-based coaching program where they help people reverse inflammatory bowel disease through a high-carb plant-based diet. I'm gonna put the links and his website in the description box so you can follow him. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video with more original content.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm joined here by Areli, Dr. Areli, who's a raw vegan doctor. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, nice to be in your podcast.
Wonderful. Yes, it's really exciting to have you on. And so first of all, just to start off with, I would like you to talk to the audience a little bit about your journey to a plant-based diet and, any other things you want to discuss around, obviously you're medically trained and so how does that influence your decisions around what you do from a nutrition perspective? Yeah, let's hear a little bit about your journey.
Sure. Well, I'm a medical doctor. I train medicine in my home country, which is Mexico. I guess my decision to go into medical school has to do with my kind of inner or innate way of looking at things, trying to help people. I remember trying to cure cancer when I was growing up, or helping my grandmothers with their illnesses and all that. So I guess that innate feeling of I want to cure, help people was inside of me, and that prompted me to choose medical school. So as a naive medical student, you go into the system that you think is gonna teach you the ways to help people. So that's what I did. And then in my career, I can definitely tell you that I was a conventional eater. In Mexico, we have a similar diet to the Western diet, probably a little bit healthier because it's more like a homemade, but still I was a student and I was eating anything that I can buy in the cafeteria. So I gained a lot of weight during medical school. In Mexico, we have internship, which is a 5th year of the career where you do night shifts, and it's very heavy, like 48 hours non-sleep, and then you sleep and take breaks. So I gained lots of weight. And by the end of my internship, I realized that I gained lots of weight and I wanted to lose it. So I asked one of my colleagues in the social service, because that's the 6th year of career. You serve to the community for free for a year, because Mexico has still free education. Some universities, so mine was one of those public schools. So I went to the social service. One of my colleagues said, why don't you try the Atkins diet to lose weight? And I did for a year. So for a year, I definitely lost weight, but some of my kind of things that bother me, like cellulite, varicose veins tendency, retention, puffiness, all those things never disappear. I lost the weight, but I was like a skinny fat. I think that's how it's called. So that way, or that prompted me to kind of investigate more, like what is the optimal way of eating, because obviously this is not working. I was always depending on coffee, didn't have energy. The Atkins diet is protein 3 times a day. So that led me to investigate vegetarianism, and I was vegetarian from 2008 to 2013. So during that,
so what made you decide to think, okay, I'm eating all this meat heavy, protein heavy, fat heavy food, and okay, first of all, you probably didn't feel great, but also the weight loss wasn't happening the way you wanted it to. So what made you think, okay, well, I've invested a whole year of my life in this, why should I change to eating a more plant-based type of diet?
Well, at the beginning, probably the first 3 or 4 months, it was wonderful because the weight started dropping. But then the problems that I still carried within me, that was not nice to have. It was still there. And then the dependency on coffee used to feel alert because obviously you're deprived of carbohydrates. So I was following a YouTuber, I guess like a yogini who was vegetarian. So I think that led me to investigate more about diet, because obviously in medical school you don't learn about nutrition at all. You don't make the connection about what you eat matters.
Okay, well, that's a very interesting point, because I wanted to bring that up with you around talking to your doctor about diet, because you see a lot of things even on like in medical, I guess, not advertisements, but government pages and things. If you have any questions about your diet, talk to your doctor, or talk to your doctor about this nutrient or that nutrient. But from my understanding, is there's very little nutrition training in medical school. So why should we listen to our doctor in terms of diet advice?
Yeah, I mean, I guess when they say ask your doctors, it's because they're advertising a pharmaceutical. So doctors know a lot about pharmaceutical interactions. You know that you shouldn't prescribe vitamin K rich food to patients taking warfarin, for example, because they bleed.
Right.
So we know about interactions. We know about how, folic acid rich food, what they can do, all these things. So, but not necessarily what is the best nutrition strategy for a patient with diabetes.
So it's actually understanding how a change in diet could affect the pharmaceutical medication you're currently on. Is that the whole idea behind it?
Exactly.
Okay, that's
most of the
interesting.
time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, and talk about the nutrition training that doctors do get, and what do you think about that?
Oh yeah, well, unless the curriculum of medical students has changed, which I don't think so, because like a couple of years ago I checked and it was still the same. Nutrition, at least in my medical school, I received nutrition education for 3 months, but it was 1 hour per week. So if you compile, it was like 16 hours within 3 months of nutrition during 6 years of medical education. And it wasn't even like, oh, sweet potatoes are great carbohydrate sources. It was more like biochemistry. Carbohydrates are made of carbon and things like that. It wasn't, or what is the healthiest oil? Things like that.
Okay, fascinating. All right, and so carry on. And so you made a shift to vegetarianism.
So I switched to
where did you go from there?
vegetarianism after my internship, after the Atkins diet. And I think I feel better, slightly better, because I was not dependent on coffee anymore. Then I discovered this Fit for Life book that talk about eating fruit in the morning, and then you can eat whatever. So I liked it a lot because fruit gave me the energy in the morning, and then I could indulge in whatever. I was still vegetarian at the time. Probably my dinner was about cheese and all that. So my acne never went away. My tendency to have varicose vein and fluid retention never went away because the cheese is so salty. And that was my biggest thing to quit, the cheese. But I transitioned to veganism after 4 years in vegetarianism because I was getting more into the holistic way of looking at things. And I watched a documentary called Earthlings in 2013, and I remember the day because it's my vegan anniversary, it's November 30. So overnight I decided, you know what, no longer gonna participate in this cruelty. And I didn't know what to do. I mean, probably I had cheese cravings for a month or so, but I made it.
Yeah, I used to be a big cheese eater. Yeah, put cheese on everything as well. One of the interesting facts I learned about cheese is that the bacteria in cheese that gives it that kind of pungent smell is the same bacteria that exists in athlete's foot.
Oh.
And that's like, obviously that's, for me, it was like, oh, I'm not going anywhere near cheese ever again. But obviously, the other things about cheese that make it really horrible is, it's heavily processed, high in saturated fat, and protein, cholesterol, all those things that do nothing for us. And there's no fiber to feed the good gut bugs, that look after us as well. So, so obviously, a really positive decision for you to go in that direction. And did you go, obviously you're raw vegan now. Was that the first step did you make, or were you eating
No, I was
a plant-based diet?
Vegan. Yeah, plant-based cooked vegan, 2013. I knew about raw veganism, but it was mostly like watching YouTube videos from people doing it, not from the perspective of a medical point of view. It was more like, oh, that's interesting, and all these testimonials of people dropping weight and healing their face.
Mm.
I was still having acne after going into vegetarianism, but once I stopped the
Mm.
cheese, all the inflammation, the puffiness in my face, and the acne started to dissipate. So that was a big
Mm-hmm.
change for me. And,
Mm.
I was super busy during those years, doing my residence in Mexico, trying to prepare to move to the States, doing all the examinations, studying, fulfilling my duties as a resident in Mexico. So I couldn't really focus on my health. So I was always like in the touching the overweight line in terms of
Mm.
a body mass index. I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
unhealthy. I still run. I always have run since I was in medical school. But yeah, it wasn't my priority, I guess, until I moved to the States and I said, you know what, you always want to improve, right? Once you achieve a certain goal, you always want more. So I said, well, I always wanted to have like a athletic body. And even though I exercise a lot, I don't seem to achieve that. I'm always depending on coffee. I want clean energy for my body and all those things. So yeah, watching lots of raw vegan testimonies and
Mm-hmm.
probably understanding now more about the nutrition, the science of nutrition. I just decided I
Mm.
am doing it because, like everyone, we have our doubts. Is raw veganism deficient? Is it extreme? So, and also the ego, because we
Mm.
think, no, I can still sustain like a high raw, because so after cooked vegan I went high raw and I was like, I can still sustain this, but it's an ego thing. Like you think that you're special, so with the little effort that you're making, or not 100% effort, you should get the results of a raw vegan diet. And I
Mm.
was back and forth, 2016 to 2018. It took me 2 years to understand that raw is the way to go. I was high raw, fully raw for 3 days, then going back to cook for 2 weeks and alternating until I said,
Mm.
enough is enough. I know what I need to do. And I did like
Mm.
a transitional juice fast for a week just to, eliminate all the cravings. And yeah, since
Mm.
January 1st, 2018, I've been raw. I'm going to be fully raw, I guess, until, at the end of this year, it's going to be 4 years. And
Mm.
I'm always honest and transparent. When I have cooked food, probably it's like if I go to Whole Foods, which is a store here in the States, and if they have
Mm.
cooked green chickpeas, and if I top like 1 tablespoon or two, obviously that's not raw, but
Mm.
understanding the myths of raw veganism as well along the way made me realize that having that as a topping is not going to hurt me, right? So
Mm. Mm.
yeah, I allow
Yeah.
myself doing those things once in a while. If I abuse it, I know how I feel. So that's
Mm.
that's the balance. You are not abusing the cooked food, and you're very selective in your cooked food if you decide to
Mm-hmm.
have it. But in my case, I know how I feel, so I choose to stay raw.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, yeah, I mean, we are very, Shamiz and I were both very high raw. And if people that have been following us for a while know that we love our fruit and fruit until dinner. And some days we do raw days as well. So we're kind of probably in that situation where you were a
Yeah.
couple of years, 4 or 5 years ago, before you made that full shift where um, you decided, okay, and I've been fully raw for a few months as well, and it feels amazing. So anyone who's watching this and feels like, they want to give it a go, you've not really got nothing to lose. I mean, you will feel amazing.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so that's very interesting. So let's go into some of that information that you learned as you decided to make that decision into raw veganism. Okay. And obviously, Areli's made a really conscious decision about what she wants to do, and people have to understand where they're at physically and mentally before making that leap. And I think the way you did it was really good, where you kind of went vegetarian, then vegan, then whole food, plant-based kind of. I'm assuming that's the kind of timeline that it took. And then into raw veganism. Whereas for me, I went from meat eater to raw vegan in almost like a couple of months.
Wow.
So that's why it's probably where I find myself in this situation where I have to kind of progress my way along into a more raw diet as time goes on. But let's go into some of the things that you found about the raw vegan diet. What really attracted you from a scientific perspective about being a raw vegan?
Yeah, so the purpose of eating should be to get most of the nourishment of the food and leaving the least residue, because that residue is what taxes our body. So rather than just getting clean energy, we also have to deal with things that may intoxicate us or make us sick. So when you're eating processed food, obviously there is a little bit of nutrition in there, but the body spends most of its energy trying to detoxify and to eliminate as fast as possible. And when we saturate the body with processed food, I mean, what is processed food? Okay, let's call it like a piece of bread, bread with cheese. I mean, we're talking about, croissant or pizza, whatever. So many ingredients that are not needed.
We call them edible food-like substances.
Yes, I mean, it's so
not actually food. One of my colleagues actually put it in that way to me. Edible, it's not food, it's an edible food-like substance.
Yeah. Yeah,
it's because you don't want to give it that terminology, right? Like, calling something food that's not actually food gives it a different meaning than what it actually has. And if you actually think about it as not food, you look at it in a different way.
Yeah, that's a good concept. It's edible. You can eat it. It's not going to kill you immediately. Like if you're eating an inedible poisonous mushroom, right? But just because it's not going to kill you in the moment, that doesn't mean that it's not going to kill you in the long run. So that's exactly the science behind raw veganism. When you eat processed pseudo food, which is a bunch of chemicals and stimulants that make you crave that pseudo food, you are intoxicating your body slowly and inflaming your body. You're putting your body in a state of chronic inflammation. And chronic inflammation is the root cause of all the chronic conditions that we are dealing in Western societies, starting with overweight, obesity, diabetes type 2, hyperlipidemia, hypertension, Alzheimer's, all kidney
IBD,
disease, all this, everything, and even in children.
Multiple sclerosis,
Yes. Oh, yeah. Autoimmune diseases. I mean,
autoimmune disease,
yeah.
Big
There are
time.
a couple of doctors that heal their autoimmune conditions with a raw and high raw diet. One healed multiple sclerosis. I don't know if you heard of Sarai Stancic.
Yes, I've heard of her.
Yeah. And Dr. Brooke Goldner, she had lupus, and now she's in remission with a high raw diet. So,
absolutely, and obviously, there's a lot of other ones as well. And we worked with doctors who've come to us and wanted to heal IBD. So we had a gastroenterologist heal on our program. We had a gynecologist heal on our program. It's been quite it's been amazing to see so many people get better as they go on this journey and eat more fruits and raw foods. And it's not 100% raw our program, but if you want to, you can. It's not like we would discourage someone from being raw if they chose to do that as well. So because we're big proponents of raw food. All right, so let's go through some of the myths. So obviously, when you're eating the raw food, okay, so some people say when you cook certain foods, they become more available, like the nutrition becomes more available, but you're saying the opposite. Just playing devil advocate for a second here. What would you say about that situation?
Well, I mean, I guess it depends what you want to eat. If people choose to eat beans, you definitely have to cook them, because otherwise they will be super toxic. So one way to eliminate the toxins of the beans is to cook them and super cook them. Not really just like you have to soak them many hours and then cook them very well. So the argument of raw vegans that beans are not food for us has to do with that principle. You have to process them in order to eat them, because otherwise we couldn't eat that. Same for rice and cereals. In the natural state, we are not inclined to eat those, right? So the myth, I guess, has to do with the toxins that are released. Like some people say it induces leukocytosis, therefore it's a toxin. I think that there are certain foods that were studied when they did those experiments. I'm not very familiar with those types of studies. I know the leukocytosis guy, I think it was a Russian guy, I think. But there are some studies that have demonstrated that even with any food that you eat, there is some sort of leukocytosis because your body has to kind of get into the heat to process the food. And it's not just, it doesn't have to do with the selection of food. Probably there is more leukocytosis when you eat processed food, but leukocytosis happen regardless of the food. So we go back to the same principle. The least inflammation you can have when you eat your food, the better. I don't think there is any damage on eating sweet potato, which is baked or boiled. I don't think that's toxic at all. Definitely the nutritional value could be reduced compared if you use the sweet potato, but at the same time, you're making the starches more digestible. It's a matter of preference, really. Like some people live in Norway, for example, they don't have 100% of the time ripe tropical papayas, you know. So why would you expect someone that is in Norway be 100% raw when in reality sticking to raw veganism and increasing the fat content will be more detrimental? Because you can be you can be raw vegan but fat based, and for some people it works, but for the people that work, they end up doing one meal a day. That's the only way that I can see high fat raw vegan work. They only eat once a day, so the body can process the excess of fat. For us that try to be more fruit based, I think that's the key component. And yeah, I mean, I think I'm not digressing, but in a nutshell, cooking a healthy food, like for example, carrots, you can eat carrots raw, you can use them. And I think if you shred them or use them, you're going to get a lot of nutrition compared as if you steam them. But steaming a carrot is not going to kill you, probably decreases the nutritional value by 30%, but you still get all the benefits. Yeah.
Yes, that's
So it's a matter
that's a
of
very
being
interesting way of
selective.
putting that.
Yeah, being selective with the type of food that you're gonna cook, and not justifying, you know, your cooked veganism with, oh, now I can cook anything, right? So.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Okay, what are some of the other myths of being a raw vegan that you may have come across over the years, and can you maybe talk through, you know, like you hear about people saying that you're going to be deficient, that you're not going to get all of the nutrient profile from the foods. You need to eat some cooked food, otherwise you're not going to get everything that you need. Where does that come from, and you know, talk through some of how, whether that's actually true or not true.
Right. I think some of the myths would be, and I'm sorry for two of the influencers that really, you know, put me in this kind of way of eating, which are Australian, by the way, but I'm not going to say in Israel, you know them. Eat carb up, eat a lot of carbs, no matter, you don't have to count calories. I think that's a myth. If you really want to stay healthy, lean, you have to track yourself. If you're spending more calories that you are eating, obviously you need to carb up more. But if you are a sedentary person, it's not going to be the same as somebody who eats 50 bananas a day, but they are running marathons every day, you know? So you have to be rational. You have to be honest with yourself. And that's one of the big myths, that calories don't matter in this lifestyle. It matters. It definitely matters.
Yeah, maybe not to the same extent as someone who's eating a very calorically dense diet. I mean, you know, for example, if someone was eating, you know, 3,000 calories of McDonald's, for example, or 3,000 calories of fruit, they would still have a different, I guess, profile, because you'd have more thermogenesis in the person who's eating the fruit, and you'd burn more calories just through normal day-to-day body activity. But I get exactly what you're saying. You can't just do whatever because, you know, it's, even though it's a healthy food. But I guess the other thing with that is some people take that to the other extreme and they undereat significantly. And then that's where you see a lot of these so-called ex-vegans as well, isn't it? Like, who've gone into this high raw diet or this raw diet, and they're still trying to keep their portion controlled the same as what someone, you know, like only one small plate of or fruit, or like 2 or 3 bananas as a meal or something like that. It's really understanding I guess, how much energy you need, how much fuel you need for the day, and then meeting that without excessively over consuming it as well.
Yeah, and I understand the posture of all these influencers that are really strong in their opinions. Like, you have to eat more, because we most of the problems in the raw vegan community is under eating, right? So I understand the push for more calories, but at the same time, once you're into this lifestyle, you have to focus in variety of fruits and vegetables, and rather than just carving up. That will be one of the main,
Yes, I agree. I
the body
definitely agree.
craves nutrition and calories, but you
Yes.
have to have this Dr. Furman approach where, okay, I'm gonna eat my calories, but I'm still eating my nutrients as well. Because bananas are great, dates are great, but are you getting your greens? Are you getting your, you know? So
Yeah, different, and we know that for the gut as well. You know, the gut needs to ferment lots of different types of fibers, and part of that is having variety in your diet. And I guess where you're coming from is that the people who've tried the raw vegan diet and they've only had a select number of foods because people have told them these are the type of foods that you're going to get most of your calories from, are the ones that may struggle with deficiencies and things like that. Whereas if you're eating lots of greens and salads and vegetables as well, because you can eat a lot of vegetables raw, and then lots of different fruits, different colors. Colors are very important. So that's absolutely right. I hear you on that. I think maybe some advice I may give in terms of when you first start this diet, track how much you're eating. So that way, if you have some kind of calorie counter, especially for the first 2 or 3 months, this is what I did anyway, to see how many calories do I use, what's my basal metabolic rate, and then you can build a diet that suits that, right? So if you don't understand how many calories you need, then it's very easy to under or overeat without really knowing what you're doing. So I think there's both sides of that, isn't that? Where there's some people who go to one extreme where they'll just overeat and get on this carb heavy diet and just keep eating and eating because I guess an influencer told them that. Or on the other side is, under eating because they're too scared of weight gain and they've come from this restriction background and things like that. So absolutely, I think there's both sides to that sort of story. And if you focus on nutrition, and I think initially definitely monitoring, what foods are giving you what nutrition, how many calories are you getting, and then once you've learned and understood that, you can take it from there. You don't have to keep micro managing everything that you do, right?
Right. Yes, you learn as you, the more you get into this path of eating, you just learn, and hopefully don't repeat the same mistakes, because sometimes when I was in England, sometimes I did like online consultations from long-term raw vegans, and they asked me, I think I feel stuck. And some of the main issues were like, they neglected their fats, because even though this lifestyle is low fat, some went to the extreme, and then they neglected their fats, or they neglected their greens, and they neglected rotating greens and incorporating the rainbow in their salads, things like that. So,
yeah, I mean, let's talk about fats, because there is that side of it where you said very high fat raw vegan. We probably won't go there. We know that's not necessarily, some people can do it, but I don't know if it's necessarily the healthiest way to be. But where do you primarily source your fats, and how much fat would you eat, I guess, as a total percentage of calories? Nuts and seeds, for example, where do you see those kind of foods?
Yeah, so for me, I think my main source of fat is seeds, and I focus on the omega-3 rich seeds, which is chia seeds, flax seeds, hemp seeds. And then I switch to omega-6 rich fats like avocado, pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds, things like that. Walnuts I have once in a while, pistachios, and almonds, but I don't do much peanuts anymore, because I've noticed that I develop dandruff for some reason. Peanuts do not make like my body happy. I focus on the omega-3 rich seeds basically, and I soak them and I blend them for my dressings, or I'd add them as a toppings for my salads.
Okay, and what like in terms of a total percentage of calories, where would you sit in terms of fat content on average?
Yeah, I think during the summertime I go low, probably 10 to 15%, and then during winter probably 20% or less. And the reason why is because if I go lower than that, I think that there is a difference between men and women, especially women in reproductive ages. I feel like we need a little bit more fat than the recommended popular 80-10-10. And I really appreciate Doug Graham's principles and David Klein. And, I think they have a point. But as a woman, on myself, and I've seen other women as well, they tend to do a little bit higher in fat, probably above 10%.
And women do hold more body fat in general than men anyway. So that kind of does make sense. And I haven't actually considered it from that perspective either, because yes, you're right. Most of the texts that we do read are written by men, and we do have slightly different physiology. And so, yeah, we should consider that. So that's a really interesting point that you make.
And also I want to touch base on some of the things that probably not many people consider when addressing the low fat issue. I think the low fat has to do with not mixing the last meal of the day with the first breakfast of the day. Because if you eat a fatty dinner, there's going to be some conflict when you eat in the morning or midday. So one of the things to avoid that, or one of the tricks, is to do intermittent fasting. And again, we go into this dangerous area where people recommend carb up, eat more calories. But along the way, you learn that your body is more efficient when you leave a large window of not eating. So I learned, and it works really well for me, to start eating around 6 or 7 p.m. and not eating until 10 or 11 next day. So that really gives a window for the fats that I eat in the night to not mix with the fruity meal of the day.
Yeah, because once you mix fat and sugar, then the sugar is going to start to ferment in your bowel, and that's not going to be good for you. Interesting you say that, because the longer I eat in tune with my body, the more I don't feel hungry first thing in the morning. So most of the time I do exactly the same, where I'll finish eating between 5:30 and 6:30.
Yeah.
And then I won't eat till, sometimes 9 or 11 even. Sometimes I get really busy with meetings and I won't eat till midday. One of the things, though, and I do agree, intermittent fasting is exceptional and it can provide a lot of good benefits, but people do need to make sure that they can meet their calorie requirements within their particular window that they choose. And I think that's the biggest mistake people make when they do intermittent fasting. They leave too short a window for eating, and they don't actually meet their requirements. And the other thing with intermittent fasting is I don't believe in necessarily having a window that's rigid. So say, for example, you wake up one day and you are actually hungry at 8:30 in the morning, for example. Okay, and the body's telling you it wants nourishment. And you say, no, I cannot eat till 11 because this is my intermittent fasting. I don't think that's necessarily a very productive way of being either.
No, because it would lead to overeating in the afternoon, and that's what you don't want to avoid. You want to avoid that. In my case, for example, I exercise first thing in the morning. I don't have any pre-workout meal or snack, anything. So I go on an empty stomach. That's the best workout I can do. And then when I do an intense, like if I usually do 3 miles per day, but if I go 4 miles of a run, I start to have hunger earlier. So I'm not gonna, not listen to my body, rather than having the intermittent fasting rule. I eat 1 hour as my body asks for. So yeah.
And I think also the longer you do this, the more you can understand that.
Yes.
And so, don't try and go and do advanced techniques like intermittent fasting and those kind of things when you're first starting on your journey, because that's where you're most likely to fail. You need to learn and experiment and understand what you need. And as I said, tracking what you do in the initial stages, just to make sure, because it's a big change. You're eating foods that are low in caloric density and very high in volume, so it's easy to feel full on lower amount of calories. but again, if you do the opposite, eat lots of smoothies and things, then it's very easy to over consume on calories as well. So
Yeah.
it's really understanding how much to eat and what to do with the body. I think that's some very good advice that you've given. Exercise, that's an interesting thing. Okay, talk about exercise and how you incorporate that into your life and how your body has felt, because there's something I teach my people who work with me who are athletes, and how to recover from exercise, because anyone can get to a very high level of fitness, but what I found is that certain eating patterns impact recovery and how your muscles feel and things like that. So maybe let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think many people, when they approach this lifestyle, most of the time it's because they want to lose weight. Rare people come on this lifestyle to gain weight, but I feel like there is a time for and place for recovery, and that's some of the things that many people neglect. I think for athletes and for anybody in general, if you don't sleep enough, no matter how much you exercise, actually, that's kind of like a signal for your body that you are overstressed, and that stress is going to generate more cortisol, which is going to enhance fat deposits in the belly area, which is what we don't want. So I think along with exercise, which has to be a combination of cardio and resistance and weight training, you have to consider rest as a priority as well. So having I don't know how many hours of sleep you need, but minimum 7, that's great. And then if you are like exercising a lot on the weekend, just try to rest more. But yeah, along with cardio for women in particular, for men as well. I think men are more interested in building muscle. For women, sometimes it's more like sweating and melting the fat. But women need to consider that resistance training is super important, because we need to build a little bit of muscle, because once you have more muscle, you burn fat easily, and also prevents osteoporosis, and it makes your bones strong. So yeah, try to alternate cardio, then resistance training, and a little bit of weightlifting and flexibility as well. So it's a combination. We should be fully functional when we age. So yeah, for me, I mean, I'm a runner, so I had to slow down a little bit in my runs. So rather than running 5 miles per day, I just run 3, and the rest of the time is stretching and kind of some calisthenics or resistance training.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's good. That's good. And I think a lot of people neglect sleep. And I
Okay.
find that with our clients as well, is that sleep is one of the things that I discuss with a lot of people. I have to just keep talking about sleep and the importance of sleep, because that's when a lot of the healing happens, when a lot of the recovery happens, is in those early morning hours. And if we're not resting and giving our body enough time to recuperate, then definitely I think makes it more difficult. And some of the things you talked about, the cortisol levels increasing, and that affects stresses and all sorts of different things as well, isn't it? So it's really important to make sure that you're taking the time to rest your body after exercise. And especially, I suppose, the more you exercise, you may even need more than 7 hours of sleep, 8, 9 hours of sleep sometimes. And getting to sleep earlier is very important too, not staying up late, and burning the midnight oil is also very important for your body to function. And as you would know, we work around the circadian rhythm, so making sure that it's close to sleeping during times where the sun's down and not sleeping when the sun's up is important as well.
Yeah,
Okay.
totally. The circadian rhythm is very important. And actually, some people think that if they go to bed at midnight, sorry, and then they sleep until 10 a.m., it doesn't compensate the earlier hours. Like, rather go to bed at 10 and wake up at 7 or 6,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. I mean, we've all experienced it in the past when we've had late nights out. And even if you get 8 hours of sleep, if you come home at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning, even if you have 8 hours of sleep, you do not feel the same the next day compared to if you'd gone to sleep at 9:30 or 10:30 and had the 8 hours sleep from there. It's a very different feeling. And, you probably felt that. I mean, just when we're on sleep, you've done night shift a lot. I've never had that experience. How did that affect your health?
I gained lots of weight, even though I was
Mm,
being cautious on what I ate. Obviously, I was eating an
mm,
omnivore diet, but I focus on, oh, well, because when you're doing night shifts, the cafeteria for the healthcare workers, they open at
mm,
midnight to give you something to keep going during the night. So I ate at midnight, and sometimes I just focus on the pieces of cheese that they gave you. So no matter how restrictive I try to be, those cortisol spikes definitely made me gain weight.
mm,
Yeah. And the
mm,
stress, of course, because
absolutely.
you're an intern, so lots of stress. Yeah.
Yeah. And because a lot of, removal of toxins happens in the early hours of the morning, if you're having to be awake and working during those times, you're setting yourself up for, your body having to work a lot harder
Yeah.
um, in other moments, aren't you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. So I don't think an intern can last for a couple of years. I think one is enough, and you are young, so you don't feel it that much. But yeah, for some people that are more
Mm,
sensitive like me, like definitely I put some weight. I remember the guys didn't, maybe they lost some weight, but most of the women after internship, they gained weight.
yeah. Okay. So, I mean, look, I think, everything we've talked about here has been really interesting and insightful, and I really appreciate you sharing your time and taking the time out of your busy schedule to have a chat and join on the podcast here. Just in closing, is there any kind of piece of advice you'd give to someone who's either considering, let's say, plant-based or even raw vegan? What would you say to them about taking those first few steps into the lifestyle?
Yeah, I would say that you have to educate yourself in this lifestyle. Take baby
Mm,
steps at the beginning. I mean, some people go raw vegan overnight and they fail and they think it's a diet when in reality it's like lack of education. So I would
mm,
say educate yourself, take baby steps, and don't fall into the dogma of if you break the rules or if you have cheat days when you eat cooked vegan food. It's just a learning experience, as
mm,
I said at the beginning, I choose to stay raw because that's the way I feel at my best. When you
mm,
have cheat days and you feel terrible the next day, it's just your body telling you, you know what, I no longer have the microbiome to digest cooked food. So whenever you bombard me with something heavy, obviously I'm going to overreact, but it's nothing of, especially if you focus on healthy cooked food, it's nothing
mm,
that is toxic. If you want to
mm,
stay high raw, there are ways to do it, and I'm sure that you are recommending your clients and people doing the right way. So
mm,
yeah, just be super honest, because when you
mm.
allow yourself to have cooked cheat days, that gives yourself permission subconsciously, like, oh, now if I eat a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and it's like a slippery slope. Many people talk
Mm,
about this. Once they're raw vegans and they allow themselves to have cooked food here and there, it's a slippery slope. And I understand that because cooked food
mm,
is so addictive. I don't know. Sometimes people are under eating. That's why they have cravings for cooked foods if they want to stay raw. So that will be my piece of
mm,
advice. Don't be dogmatic. It's a learning process. If you follow the wagon of
mm,
raw veganism or even plant-based, just dust
mm.
it off and keep going.
That's
And
it.
the other advice will be, okay, educating yourself. And I was almost.
Mm. Don't try and be perfect. I think that's something like this perfectionism mindset can really be detrimental to achieving long-term success.
Yeah.
Because if you're trying to be perfect all the time, in one slip up, you can really start beating yourself up, and then you're like, oh, I did it once, and I won't, and just keep on going from there, and you don't come back to what's healthy for you. So we talk about progress over perfection,
Yeah.
and it doesn't matter if you weren't 100%. I think really what matters is what you do 95 to percent of the time. And if you stay consistent over a period of time, you're going to see those long-term results. It's probably the same as, training physically for, whether you're a runner or you're an athlete or something like that. If you're not consistently doing it over a period of time, you can't expect to not run for a few months and then go and run a marathon the next day. You have to build that up, and health is the same. You need to build it up, and it takes time and persistence to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, and also I would
Yeah.
I would say once you go plant-based, because everything else has supplements. Like when you're a cooked vegan, if you eat cereal or if you everything is
Mm,
fortified with B12 and other
mm,
vitamins. So Do not neglect your B12. You have to test yourself
Yes.
if you don't want to feel like, oh, I'm overdoing the B12. But I see the opposite, and I'm telling you from firsthand experience. Again, when I was doing consultations when I was in England, some people improve dramatically after supplementing with B12, and that's something that some circles of raw veganism think that is not important, just because they haven't experienced the deficiency symptoms, but they're there. So the best thing to do is test yourself. But if you feel fatigued, depressed, low memory, tingling, numbing, that's definitely B12 deficiency. So don't neglect it.
Yeah, no, great advice. B12 is very important, and it's important not only for plant-based eaters. I mean, the majority of people who take B12 supplements are eating animals. So it's even if you're not a vegan or a plant-based eater, important to get your levels checked and just make sure that you're not deficient in B12. So great advice. All right. Again, thank you so much for joining me, and I really appreciate your time. And yeah, I think some really, really amazing advice there. For people who are interested in following Dr. Areli, I'll be posting her details down there below. So all of her social media links. And if you want to follow her, I'd highly recommend it. She gives some really good advice on her Instagram channel as well. And for people who've made it this far, thank you so much for joining us. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you give the video a like and hit the subscribe button so that you can be aware of all our recent uploads, and that little bell notification will give you notifications of our latest videos. Once again, thank you so much for joining us here. Make sure that you eat plants and lots of them. Take care, and we'll see you for the next one.